In the distant future, humanity found itself among a vast intergalactic council composed of numerous alien species. But unlike the other advanced civilizations, humans were viewed with skepticism and condescension. The council, dominated by a few powerful species, often regarded humans as a primitive race whose values of compassion and mercy were seen as weaknesses, relics of a bygone era. It had been centuries since humanity had first entered the galactic stage, but their reputation remained fragile. One recent event had only served to strengthen these negative views. A small group of hostile aliens had launched a violent raid on a human settlement, causing devastation and suffering. Yet, instead of executing the attackers, as the Council would have done without hesitation, the humans had chosen to spare their lives. They offered the alien raiders a chance at redemption, a second chance to change. This act of mercy, though admirable in human eyes, was seen as a grave mistake by the Council. It was a sign of weakness. The leaders of the Council convened in a grand chamber, with representatives from each species sitting in their high-backed chairs. Tension hung in the air as the matter of humanity's future was discussed. The alien delegates were sharp, their voices filled with disdain as they condemned the humans for their decision. To them, mercy was not a virtue, but a flaw, a dangerous one. The Council had grown tired of waiting for humanity to prove itself. The time had come for a decision. Either humanity would prove it had the strength to stand with the other great civilizations, or it would be removed from the Council. As the debate raged on, the figure of Jace Monroe, a young human diplomat, stepped forward to address the assembly. Jace had worked tirelessly for years to present humanity in a better light, but even he knew this was his final chance to plead their case. He was not an experienced leader, nor a battle-hardened general, but his heart burned with determination. With a calm but firm voice, he began to speak. "We are not weak," Jace's words rang out, echoing in the high-ceilinged hall. "What you call weakness, we call hope. Hope that even the most brutal of beings can find redemption. Hope that peace is not achieved through violence, but through understanding." The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably, their eyes narrowing. Jace continued, "Humanity values second chances because we know that even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to change. We are a species built on the principles of compassion and growth. Yes, we may not always choose the path of war, but that does not mean we lack strength. Strength is not just measured by how many enemies we can defeat, but by how many we can uplift." His words were heartfelt, and for a brief moment, Jace saw the smallest flicker of recognition in the eyes of a few of the alien delegates, but it was quickly replaced by a cold indifference. The Council was unmoved, and a silence fell over the room. The decision was clear. The representatives began to murmur amongst themselves, the fate of humanity sealed in their minds. With a heavy heart, the head of the Council stood. His voice was final and unwavering. "Humanity will face the consequences of its actions. We will give you a chance, but it will be in the form of trials. Trials meant to test your strength, your will, and your resolve. If you pass, you will remain in the Council. If you fail, you will be cast aside. The decision is no longer in your hands." The room fell silent once more as the weight of those words settled on Jace's shoulders. He had fought for humanity's right to remain part of the Council, but now the gauntlet had been thrown. His people would be tested like never before. The trials would be brutal, and the risks were high. Jace's heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. He knew that this would be the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one that would either lift them to unimaginable heights or force them to face the consequences of their choices. The stage was set. Humanity's future was on the line, and the trials were about to begin. Jace Monroe stood on the cold metal deck of the starship, gazing at the dark expanse of space as it stretched endlessly before him. His mind was still racing after the Council's harsh decision. How was he supposed to prepare humanity for what was coming? The trials, which could decide their fate, loomed ahead like a shadow. As he looked out into the stars, a feeling of dread gripped him. He had pleaded for humanity's compassion, for second chances, but now it seemed that what had once been their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. How would the world respond? Jace's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp beep from his communicator. It was a message from Earth, a reminder that he had little time to prepare. He was needed immediately. Arriving back on Earth, Jace met with high-ranking officials from every major government and military faction. His face was drawn, the weight of the council's verdict heavy on his shoulders. They all gathered in a secure room, the air thick with tension. "We need to unite. The council has spoken and we must be ready. They've given us no choice but to prove ourselves," Jace said, his voice unwavering despite the storm brewing inside him. The officials exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to move forward. Some were enraged by the council's judgment, while others were worried about the cost of confronting such a powerful alliance of alien races. "We cannot lose our identity," one of the senior diplomats argued, his voice filled with fear. "If we resort to violence and cruelty, what will make us any different from those who wish to destroy us?" Others nodded, their concerns about abandoning humanity's core values becoming clear. The room buzzed with disagreements, and Jace struggled to calm the rising storm. It wasn't just about military power or advanced weapons. It was about the soul of humanity. He knew that. He believed it with all his heart. But what if their soul wasn't enough this time? As Jace tried to navigate the conversation, his communicator beeped again. This time, the message wasn't from Earth's government. It was from an unknown source, a figure who had been silent for years, known only as the Prophet. The cryptic message he sent pierced the air like a chill. "When humans stop being nice, the galaxy will tremble." The words echoed in Jace's mind, and for a long moment, he stood there, frozen. Who was the Prophet? Why had he sent this message now? What did it mean? The officials in the room were quiet, sensing the shift in Jace's demeanor. "What is it, Jace?" one of them asked. But Jace was lost in thought, the warning weighing heavily on his chest. Was this a sign? Was the Prophet somehow tied to the council's decision? Or was this something deeper, something darker? The Prophet had always been a figure of mystery, someone who claimed to see the future, but no one truly knew who or what they were. Jace shook his head, pushing the thought aside for the moment. He couldn't afford distractions, not now, when everything was on the line. The meetings continued, but Jace found it harder to focus. The warning lingered, gnawing at him. What would happen if humanity truly stopped being nice? Could they really abandon the very thing that had always made them different? As the days passed, he tried to unite the world's factions, militaries, governments, even private groups who could lend their resources to the cause. But the dissent only grew stronger. The voices for peace, for compassion, became more desperate. The fear of losing their humanity, of becoming like the very species they had once fought against, was real. Jace found himself at a crossroads. On one side, there were those who were eager to show their strength, who believed that humanity needed to rise up and fight with everything they had. They argued that if humanity didn't act decisively, they would be crushed. On the other side, there were those who believed that even in the face of such overwhelming odds, humanity should not lose its moral compass. They feared that to abandon kindness and mercy would be to lose themselves forever. The Prophet's words haunted Jace. When humans stop being nice, the galaxy will tremble. Could it be that humanity's survival depended on abandoning what made them human? Would the galaxy truly tremble under the weight of their new power? Or was the Prophet warning them about something far greater, a force that even now was waiting to test humanity's resolve? Jace didn't have answers. He only had questions. and the terrifying realization that the future of humanity was teetering on the edge of a decision they might not be able to take back. The clock was ticking, the trials were coming, and Jace had to make a choice. Which path would humanity take? The tension in the air was palpable as the first trial of humanity's fate began. The Council had made their decision, and now there was no turning back. Jace Monroe, along with the human delegation, stood in the control room of Earth's most advanced military base, watching the holographic display of the battlefield. It was a simulation, yet it felt all too real. The enemy? A notorious alien. Warlord named Korak, a ruthless conqueror who had waged war across countless worlds. His army, vast and merciless, had left nothing but destruction in its wake. Humanity's forces, on the other hand, were smaller in number but equipped with the most advanced technology they could muster. For years, humanity had prided itself on avoiding unnecessary conflict, choosing diplomacy and peace whenever possible. Now, they had no choice but to fight. At first, the human commanders hesitated. General Sarah Kovacs, a seasoned military leader who had seen her fair share of conflict, felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She knew the Council was watching, judging every move they made. The plan was clear: minimal violence, maximum restraint. The human forces deployed their advanced weapons, but they did so with a careful hand, targeting only key areas of Korak's forces, hoping to subdue them without bloodshed. There was no intention to obliterate, no plan to show brutality. The battle began with precision strikes, keeping the casualties low, using their technology to disable rather than destroy. But Korak's army was relentless. No matter how many forces humanity disabled, the enemy kept coming. The battlefield was littered with debris, smoke rising from scorched earth, and the sound of weaponry filled the air. The first wave of Korak's soldiers was pushed back, but they regrouped swiftly, their brutality showing through as they charged again with even more ferocity. For every human force that was incapacitated, 2 more replaced them, only to face the same fate. It was clear, Korak was not interested in negotiation. He wanted victory, by any means necessary. As the hours passed, it became clear that the humane tactics humanity had relied upon were failing them. General Kovacs stood on the edge of the command center, her fingers tapping against the table. The battle was not going the way they had hoped. Their mercy was being met with violence, their restraint with unrelenting aggression. She watched as a squadron of human soldiers was ambushed, their retreat unsuccessful. It was in that moment, with the lives of her soldiers hanging in the balance, that Sarah Kovacs made a decision that would change everything. "Stop holding back," she ordered, her voice cold and firm. "Deploy everything. No more mercy. It's time to win." The room went silent. Those who heard her words understood the weight of what she was saying. She was no longer advocating for restraint. The time for diplomacy was over. The soldiers on the front lines, once hesitant to fully unleash their weapons, now followed orders with ruthless efficiency. The tanks, once used to disable, now obliterated enemy positions with heavy fire. The advanced drones meant to provide surveillance now dropped bombs with pinpoint precision, decimating Korak's forces. Humanity had stopped fighting with compassion. They fought to win, and they fought to win decisively. As the battle raged on, the shift was undeniable. The once proud, diplomatic humanity was now a force of ruthless pragmatism, executing the orders with a cold precision that made even the most hardened soldiers pause. It was the first real test of their new philosophy, and it was proving effective. Slowly but surely, Korak's forces began to break apart under the onslaught. Their advance stalled, their morale shattered. The warlord, seeing the tide turn against him, tried to regroup, but it was too late. With one final strike, the human forces overran his position, securing a victory that few had thought possible. But as the dust settled, a silence fell over the battlefield. The warlords' forces lay scattered, their ranks broken, but the cost was clear. The humans had won, yes, but at what cost? General Kovac stood among the wreckage, her face hardened. The battle had been won, but it had also marked a turning point for humanity. The compassion, the mercy that had once defined them, was gone. In its place was something else. A cold, calculating efficiency that had allowed them to succeed. But at a price that felt far too high. The Council, observing from afar, was stunned. They had watched humanity's transformation with growing unease. This was not the same race that had once pleaded for peace. The humans had shown their strength, but they had also shown their willingness to abandon the very values that had once set them apart. The first casualty of their newfound ruthlessness had been their honor. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again, and neither would humanity. As the human forces stood victorious, Jace Monroe couldn't help but wonder if the cost of this victory was too high. Would this new, ruthless humanity be able to find its way back? Or had they crossed a line from which there was no return? The trials had only just begun, and the path ahead was unclear. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never forget. The day humanity stopped being nice. The second trial was set to test humanity's diplomatic strength. The Council, in its infinite wisdom, decided that if humanity could not show restraint in battle, perhaps they could prove their worth through diplomacy. They selected Jace Monroe to lead the negotiation. His reputation as a passionate defender of humanity's ideals was the reason for his selection. What he didn't know, however, was that the Council had stacked the deck. The aliens they had gathered for this peace summit were not interested in negotiation. The coalition included the aggressive Vorlok, a warlike species known for their thirst for conquest, and the Tazali, a cunning and manipulative race with a reputation for using others as pawns in their intricate plots. To make matters worse, the Council had already tipped the scales in favor of the alien factions, leaving humanity at a severe disadvantage. Jace entered the negotiation chamber with a sense of determination, hoping to use his diplomatic skills to bridge the gap. He had always believed in peace, in the power of words to resolve conflicts. But as he gazed across the table at the cold, calculating faces of the alien leaders, doubt began to creep in. The Vorlok leader, Zaruk, sneered as he tapped his claws on the table, his eyes burning with the desire to dominate. The Tazali representative, Zariv, simply smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that sent a chill down Jace's spine. It was a smile of someone who had already decided how this would end. As the talks began, Jace's optimism faltered. The Vorlok and Tazali were not there to seek peace. They were there to impose their will. Their demands were harsh, unyielding. They insisted that humanity yield control of certain resources and territories, threatening the human way of life. The idea of compromise, of finding a middle ground, was foreign to them. As Jace tried to counter their demands with reasonable proposals, he realized that diplomacy, at least in this case, was nothing more than a guise for subjugation. The alien representatives weren't listening to reason. They were testing humanity's willingness to bend. It quickly became apparent that this was no longer a diplomatic negotiation. It was a battle of wills. As the tension in the room escalated, Jace felt the weight of the Council's expectations bearing down on him. The other human representatives were growing increasingly nervous. They could see that this was spiraling out of control. If they didn't secure a deal, humanity's future could be in jeopardy. But Jace refused to give in. He couldn't. He believed that negotiation, that the better part of humanity's nature, could still find a way to turn things around. However, the more he spoke, the more it became clear that his words were falling on deaf ears. In that moment, a voice interrupted the proceedings, a voice that cut through the tension like a blade. It was Kara Wren, a young but sharp human politician, who had gained prominence with her no-nonsense approach to governance. Kara had always believed that humanity's strength lay not in negotiation, but in action. She had always been a vocal critic of humanity's overly compassionate ways, and now, in the face of alien aggression, her beliefs found a stage. The Council doesn't understand the language these beings speak, Kara said, standing up, her voice steady and confident. They don't want peace. They want power. And the only way to meet them on equal footing is by showing them that humanity has the strength to take what we deserve. It's time we stop playing by their rules. The room fell silent as Kara's words echoed through the chamber. She continued, her tone firm and unwavering. We've already shown them mercy. We've already shown them compassion. And look where that has gotten us. It's time for humanity to stand tall, to let them know that we won't back down. No more negotiations, no more compromises. We'll take what we need, and we'll fight for what's ours. Her words rang in the minds of the human delegates, and for the first time, there was a shift. The room seemed to breathe in unison. The tension was palpable as the realization spread across the human side of the table. This was the new humanity. Gone were the days of pleading for mercy. Gone were the days of seeking peace at any cost. If the galaxy understood one thing, it was power. Jace, despite his doubts, found himself nodding in agreement. This wasn't the path he had wanted to take, but perhaps it was the only one left. The humans, no longer desperate to please the Council, leaned into their newfound strength. The negotiations took a hard turn, with the humans making it clear that they would not simply give in to the aliens' demands. They offered hard bargains, set their terms, and made it clear that humanity would no longer be seen as weak. The Council, observing from their hidden vantage points, was stunned. They had expected humanity to bow, to cower before the might of the Vorlok and Tazali, but instead, they had seen a humanity transformed. The peace they had hoped for was fragile, but it was secured. The alien factions, facing humanity's unexpected ferocity, retreated, albeit reluctantly. A dark realization began to form in the minds of the Council. Humanity was no longer the docile race they had once been. They had tasted power, and they would never go back. As the human delegation left the negotiation chamber, Jace felt a mixture of pride and unease. They had won a fragile peace, yes, but at what cost? The compassionate humanity he had fought so hard to protect was slipping away, replaced by something more dangerous, more unpredictable, and he couldn't help but wonder if they had just crossed a line that could never be undone. As the dust settled from the negotiations, the shift in humanity's approach became undeniable. What had once been a society built on compassion, diplomacy, and understanding was now teetering on the edge of something far more dangerous. The change had come quickly, but its effects were profound, and humanity was struggling to find balance. The rift between those who still believed in kindness and those who felt the new, more aggressive stance was necessary grew wider with each passing day. The streets of Earth were filled with heated debates, protests, and calls for action. That old factions, the pacifists who advocated for compassion and diplomacy, began to rise once more, their voices growing louder, desperate to reclaim what they feared was slipping away. But there were others, those who now believed in a future of strength and power, who saw the success of the last trial as proof that humanity could no longer afford to be weak. These factions clashed, and the very fabric of society seemed to unravel before Jace's eyes. Jace Monroe, once the steadfast diplomat, now found himself caught in the middle of a struggle he hadn't anticipated. The weight of the decisions, made in the heat of battle, the transformation of humanity from a race of peacekeepers to one of power brokers, weighed heavily on his conscience. He had fought for humanity to be seen as strong, capable, and worthy of respect. But as he watched the divide grow, he wondered if they had lost something essential along the way. Had humanity's compassion been a weakness? Or was their newfound aggression a betrayal of everything they had fought for? The questions gnawed at him, keeping him awake at night, unable to reconcile the two sides of his heart. The one that still believed in peace, and the one that had seen the harsh reality of the galaxy. But it wasn't just humanity that was changing. The Council, too, began to fracture. The Eldari, a peaceful, ancient species known for their deep connection to nature and the cosmos, were horrified by humanity's transformation. They had long championed diplomacy, nonviolence, and understanding, but now they found themselves at odds with the very race they had once supported. The Eldari were not the only ones shocked by the shift. Jarik, a representative of the Zenthrar species, was thrilled by the change. The Zenthrar, a calculating and pragmatic race, saw humanity's newfound ruthlessness as a sign of strength. They had always respected power, and now they viewed humanity with renewed interest and respect. The divide within the Council deepened, and soon the once unified front of the Galactic Assembly began to crumble. As tensions between species reached a boiling point, Jace was summoned to another emergency session with the Council. But the words exchanged were no longer about the future of humanity. They were about survival. An ancient threat, one that had long been thought extinct, had resurfaced. The Dirac. A ruthless and warlike empire the Dirac had terrorized the galaxy centuries ago before mysteriously disappearing. They were known for their brutality and merciless nature, a race that thrived on conquest and annihilation. The Dirac had watched the shifting power dynamics with growing interest, and now they believed the time had come to strike. Jace stood at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the holographic map of the galaxy as the Council members debated the implications of the Dirac's return. The threat they posed was unlike any humanity had faced before. The Dirac were not a race that sought negotiation or peace. They were a race that only understood one thing: dominance. As the realization set in, Jace felt the weight of the decisions they had made. Could humanity face the Dirac with the same power they had used to secure their place in the galaxy? Could they maintain their newfound strength and still hold onto what was left of their honor? The Council, now divided in their opinions on how to respond, was in turmoil. Some urged immediate action, calling for an all-out war against the Dirac before they could strike. Others, like the Eldari, warned against rushing into battle, advocating for a diplomatic solution despite the threat. But as the discussions raged on, Jace's mind kept returning to the same question. Could humanity truly afford to show mercy now? Could they still be the peaceful race they once were? Or had they become something else entirely? A force that would no longer be easily ignored? In the distance, hidden behind the veil of space, the Dirac Empire stirred. Their fleet, once thought to be lost to the ages, was slowly but surely making its way toward the galaxy's core. And as they advanced, the galaxy, humanity included, was about to face a reckoning. The price of strength, Jace realized, was not just measured in victories, but in the loss of innocence. And the shadow of the past, the compassion that had once defined humanity, was slowly fading, leaving a galaxy uncertain of what humanity would become. Would they stand and fight for survival, or would they risk everything to hold on to what little of their past remained? The galaxy had barely begun to process the fractures within the Council when the unimaginable happened. The Dirac Empire, long thought to be extinct, launched a surprise attack on the Council's homeworld. The Dirac, with their ruthless tactics and unstoppable war machines, descended upon the heart of the galaxy with devastating speed. The Council's forces, already divided and weakened by internal strife, scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. The Dirac, like a storm of iron and fire, tore through the defenses with ease. The Council was caught off guard, unable to mount an effective counterattack as their worlds were struck one by one. In this moment of chaos, humanity found itself thrust into the heart of the storm. Jace Monroe, General Sarah Kovacs, and Kara Wren, The human leaders who had seen their society change from a beacon of compassion to a symbol of strength had a decision to make. The Council's traditional strategies, those that had failed them so many times in the past, were not going to work this time. The humans knew it. The Dirac were not interested in diplomacy. They were not interested in treaties. They had come to conquer, and they would only understand one thing: resistance. General Kovac, who had already seen the depths of humanity's new approach, stepped forward. "We can't wait for the Council to act. We've been left out in the cold before, and we will be again if we don't take action now. This is our fight, and we're not going to let them win." Her voice was steady, and her resolve even stronger. There was no room for hesitation anymore. The time for negotiation was over. The time for war had come. With Kara Wren's unyielding political resolve and General Kovac's tactical brilliance, humanity took matters into their own hands. They rallied every remaining military force, every defense satellite, every warship they could spare. But what set humanity apart from the other galactic forces was not just their ferocity, it was their unity. Despite the fracturing of their world, despite the divide between those who wanted peace and those who sought dominance, humanity came together as one. Past grievances and old rivalries were put aside, and the fragmented factions of Earth found common ground in the face of a greater threat. Kara Wren, a political figure who had once been a vocal advocate for the new, more aggressive stance of humanity, now worked tirelessly to rally the galaxy's other races to humanity's cause. At first, many were hesitant. The Eldari were still reeling from humanity's transformation, and the Zenthrar were uncertain. But the human determination was infectious. They were not fighting for dominance or conquest. They were fighting to protect their homes, their families, their very way of life. It was this shared purpose that began to inspire others, and soon, alliances that had seemed impossible just weeks ago were formed. As the Dirac fleet advanced, humanity struck back with a calculated precision that stunned the galaxy. Their counterattacks were swift, brutal, and unlike anything the Dirac had ever faced. Their ships, equipped with advanced weapons and battle strategies honed from countless trials, tore through the Dirac forces with unrelenting force. The Dirac were caught off guard. They were ruthless, yes, but they had underestimated the humanity they now faced. The precision of the human military, their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies, was a wake-up call. The Dirac, used to overwhelming force, had not prepared for this level of coordination. But it wasn't just the military tactics that shocked the galaxy. It was humanity's ability to inspire unity. As humans worked side by side with former enemies, alien species that had once seen them as weak or insignificant, something unprecedented occurred. There was no longer an us and them. There was only the galaxy fighting to survive. The Dirac, relentless in their pursuit of victory, began to lose ground, their ranks thinning as human-led counterattacks crippled their strategic positions. For the first time since humanity had been thrust into the galaxy's political stage, the Council saw the true power of this transformed race. It was not just their military might that was extraordinary. It was their resilience and their ability to unify others. The Dirac had come to conquer, but they had underestimated the resolve of a united humanity. And as the invasion stalled, and the Dirac began to retreat, the full weight of what had transpired settled on the galaxy. The Council, now forced to recognize humanity's role in the galaxy, watched in stunned silence as the human forces brought the Dirac invasion to a halt. This wasn't the humanity they had known. This wasn't the race that had once pleaded for mercy. The human will to survive, to protect what was theirs, had become a force of nature. The invasion was repelled, and the Dirac were sent scrambling, back into the depths of space, licking their wounds and realizing that they had underestimated the one race they had thought of as weak. In the aftermath, the galaxy stood at the precipice of something new. The Council had seen the power of humanity's unity, and it was undeniable. They had not only defeated an unstoppable enemy, they had shown the galaxy that when humanity was pushed to the brink, they could become something no one had ever expected. Something far more dangerous. And as Jace Monroe stood at the head of humanity's forces, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something even greater. Would the galaxy ever be the same again? Would humanity continue to fight with this newfound power, or would the shadows of their past eventually pull them back? Only time would tell. The dust had settled. The Dirac Empire, once seen as an unstoppable force, had been driven back into the cold void of space by the fierce, unyielding resistance of humanity. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. The Council's homeworld had been saved, not by ancient alliances or carefully negotiated peace, but by the raw, unwavering will of a species that had once been dismissed as weak, as too compassionate to survive the harsh realities of the cosmos. Now, the galaxy was left to reckon with the aftermath of humanity's transformation. Jace Monroe, once the young and idealistic diplomat who had fought for compassion in a galaxy that saw it as weakness, now stood before the Council again. But this time, the room was different. There was a palpable shift in the air, an unspoken recognition of humanity's new power. The species that had once mocked humanity's kindness, those who had called them naive and unworthy of a place at the table, now watched them with a mixture of respect and wariness. Humanity had evolved in ways no one could have predicted. No longer timid or willing to simply endure the harshness of the galaxy, humanity had become a force that demanded to be taken seriously. Jace had changed as well. The years had worn on him. The weight of leadership and the responsibility of guiding humanity through its darkest hours leaving marks on his soul. He had seen the consequences of their transformation firsthand. The loss of innocence. The cost of strength. Yet, he had also witnessed the courage and unity that humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink. Standing before the Council, he felt the weight of it all pressing down on him, but he was ready. He wasn't here to plead for mercy or beg for a place among the stars. He had learned that the galaxy would not listen to such things anymore. What mattered now was balance. His speech echoed in the silent chamber. Humanity has learned, he began, his voice steady and measured, that strength without compassion is a curse, a weapon that devours its wielder, and compassion without strength is naive, a dream that will never survive the harsh light of reality. We are no longer the race that hides behind the walls of kindness, nor are we the cold, ruthless power that thrives on dominance. We are both, and more. We are the guardians of what is just, but we will not shy from the harshness of what it takes to protect that justice. The room fell silent as Jace's words sank in. The Council members, once so certain of humanity's inferiority, now found themselves at a crossroads. They had watched as humanity had not only defended themselves against the Dirac, but had also united a fractured galaxy in the process. They had seen how humans, once scattered by division, had come together with an unbreakable resolve. It was clear that humanity had no intention of being anyone's subordinate, no longer willing to follow the paths laid out by others. They would chart their own course, one defined not by weakness or fear, but by a powerful, hard-earned balance of strength and compassion. Reluctantly, the members of the Council nodded in agreement. The once unthinkable was now undeniable. Humanity was no longer a race to be underestimated or ignored. They had earned their place among the stars, not as subordinates, but as equals. The decision was made. Humanity would no longer be treated as an outsider, a lesser species, but as a powerful force that would shape the future of the galaxy alongside the other great races. As Jace's speech concluded, the reality of the moment settled in. Humanity had faced the darkness of the galaxy and come out stronger for it. The banner of humanity now flew high, not as a symbol of meekness, but as a banner of resilience, of balance. the galaxy had no choice but to reckon with the undeniable truth that when humans stopped being nice, when they stopped fearing the consequences of standing firm and embracing their full potential, the universe would never be the same again. A new era had begun, and as the stars blinked quietly in the vast expanse of space, it was clear that humanity's place among them had been forever altered. No longer just a race of dreamers, of idealists. They were now a race of warriors, diplomats, and leaders. The future of the galaxy had changed, and humanity was at its heart, unyielding and unstoppable. The balance had been struck, and the Suts Council, though reluctant, knew that there was no turning back. The age of humanity had arrived.